The rain came down suddenly, heavy and cold, drumming against the pavement as Emily Parker stepped out of the grocery store with a single paper bag held close to her chest, her mind already tired from a long day at work and the familiar worry of how she would get home without her car, which had been in the repair shop for days, forcing her to rely on buses, favors, or long walks she didn't always have the energy for. And as she stood there under the weak shelter of the store's awning, watching people rush past with umbrellas and impatience, she felt the quiet loneliness that had been following her for months, the kind that didn't shout but stayed close, reminding her that her evenings were often silent and her conversations short. When a dark blue SUV slowed near the curb and stopped, its window rolling down to reveal a face she recognized but hadn't expected to see in that moment. Daniel. Harris, her neighbor's husband, a man she had exchanged polite greetings with for years, but never more than that. His voice calm and respectful as he asked if she needed a ride since the rain was getting worse. And Emily hesitated not because she felt unsafe, but because something about the surprise of the moment made her pause. The way life sometimes shifts, slightly without warning, and yet common sense one, as the rain soaked her shoes and the sky showed no sign of clearing. So she thanked him and got in, the warmth of the car wrapping around her as the door closed, shutting out the noise of the street and creating a quiet space that felt strangely personal for two people who barely knew each other. The engine humming as they pulled away and the wipers moving steadily, filling the silence until Daniel asked how her day had been. Not in a rushed way, but as if he truly wanted to know. And Emily found herself answering honestly, talking about her job, the long hours, the small frustrations, and the feeling that time was moving faster than she expected. While Daniel listened without interrupting, nodding now and then, his eyes on the road, his presence calm and steady, which made it easier for Emily to keep talking, to say things she usually kept to herself, like how living alone had started to feel heavier lately. Not because she needed someone to fix her life, but because she missed being understood. And Daniel responded with simple words that didn't judge or advise. Just quiet understanding, saying that many people carry more than they show and that it doesn't always mean they are weak. And as the car moved through familiar streets, Emily noticed the small details, the way his voice softened when he spoke, the way he didn't rush the conversation, and she felt a strange sense of ease. That caught her off guard, because nothing about the moment was dramatic or wrong. Yet it felt important in a way she couldn't explain. And when they stopped at a red light, Daniel glanced at her briefly, his expression thoughtful, and in that second Emily felt her breath catch, not from attraction alone, but from the unexpected feeling of being seen. And she quickly looked away, reminding herself who he was and what boundaries mattered, even as her heart beat faster than it had all evening. And when they finally reached her street, the rain had softened into a light mist, and the houses looked calm and distant. Daniel slowing the car and pulling over smoothly, thanking her for the conversation and saying it had been nice to talk, a simple sentence that carried more weight than it should have. And Emily smiled, thanked him again for the ride, stepped out into the cool air, standing on the sidewalk as the car drove away, watching the taillights disappear down the street, realizing that the short ride had stirred something she hadn't expected. Not a clear desire or a plan, but a quiet awareness that her heart was still capable of reacting, of feeling a connection, in the most ordinary moments. And as she walked toward her front door, the sound of the rain fading behind her, she wondered why this brief, harmless act of kindness felt like the start of something she didn't yet understand. Unaware that this single ride had already shifted the way she would look at her quiet neighborhood and the people in it from that moment on. The next morning, Emily woke with the strange feeling that something small but meaningful had shifted. And as she moved through her routine of coffee, emails, and work calls, her thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet ride from the night before. Not replaying it in detail, but holding on to the calm it had left behind. And when she stepped outside later to take out the trash, she noticed Daniel across the street loading groceries from his car, their eyes meeting for a brief second that felt longer than usual. Both of them smiling politely, yet aware that something unspoken now existed between them. And instead of turning away quickly as she normally would, Emily nodded and said hello. Her voice steady, though her chest felt tight. Daniel greeting her the same way, friendly and careful, asking if the rain had soaked her too badly the night before, which opened the door to a short conversation that flowed easily, touching on simple things like work schedules, neighborhood changes, and how fast the seasons seemed to pass. And even though it lasted only a few minutes, Emily walked back inside, feeling more awake than she had in weeks, her mind moving faster as questions formed about why a casual talk felt so different this time. While Daniel spent the rest of his day distracted in ways he didn't expect, thinking about how natural it had felt to talk to Emily, how rare it was to have a conversation without pressure or expectation, and by the evening both of them found themselves outside again, this time by chance at the mailbox, exchanging a few more words that carried a warmth neither could ignore. And over the next few days, these moments continued. Never planned, never forced, just brief connections that happened naturally. Away from the driveway, a shared laugh over a delivery mix-up, or a quiet comment about the weather that turned into something more personal. And Emily noticed that Daniel asked thoughtful questions and remembered her answers, which made her feel valued in a way she hadn't realized she missed. While Daniel noticed how Emily listened with genuine interest, not rushing him, not trying to impress, just present. And this growing ease created a quiet tension neither of them spoke about, because both understood the lines that existed and the reasons those lines mattered, yet feelings do not always wait for permission. And one afternoon, Emily found herself walking through the park at the edge of the neighborhood to clear her head, only to see Daniel there, sitting on a bench with a coffee in his hand, looking surprised but not uncomfortable to see her. And they talked again, this time about deeper things, about dreams they once had, about how life slowly becomes busy, and how people sometimes forget to ask themselves if they are still happy. And Daniel admitted that he often felt like he was moving through days on autopilot, while Emily shared that she had spent years focusing on being strong and independent, only to realize that strength didn't cancel the need for connection. And as the sun lowered and the park grew quieter, both of them felt the weight of honesty settling between them, not heavy but real. And when they finally stood to leave, Daniel hesitated, then said softly that he appreciated these talks more than he probably should, his voice calm but sincere. And Emily felt her breath pause as she answered that she felt the same, knowing the truth in her words and the risk of saying them. And they parted without promises or plans. Yet the walk home felt different, the world sharper and quieter at the same time. And later that night, Emily found herself unable to sleep, her thoughts circling around the idea that something meaningful was growing, something that made her feel alive but also careful. And the next morning she discovered a small folded note slipped under her door, her heart racing before she even opened it. The message simple and respectful, Daniel thanking her for the conversations and saying they had reminded him how important it was to slow down and listen. And Emily sat on her couch holding the note, aware that it crossed no rules, yet still changed everything. Because now the feelings were no longer just moments shared in passing, but something acknowledged, and she realized that part 2 of this unexpected story was no longer about a ride or chance meetings, but about two people standing at the edge of an emotional choice, unsure of where it might lead, but unable to pretend it didn't exist, knowing that whatever came next would require honesty, restraint, and courage. And as Emily looked out her window toward the quiet street, she understood that this connection, gentle and unresolved, had already begun to test her heart in ways she had not prepared for. The days after the note felt different for Emily. Not louder or dramatic, but sharper, as if every sound and thought carried more meaning. And she moved through her routine with a quiet awareness that something important was unfolding beneath the surface, something she could not name yet, could not ignore, And each morning she told herself to stay grounded, to remember reality, yet each evening her thoughts returned to Daniel. Not in fantasy, but in reflection, wondering why a few honest conversations had left such a deep mark. And across the street, Daniel was going through a similar unrest, finding it harder to focus at work, noticing how often his mind drifted during meetings, replaying simple moments like Emily's thoughtful pauses, or the way she listened without judgment. Okay? And he questioned himself constantly, reminding himself of his consenter, like willing, trenting himself of his responsibilities and the life he had built, yet unable to deny that something genuine had taken shape. And when they crossed paths again near the sidewalk a few days later, the air between them felt heavier, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken thoughts, and they greeted each other politely, both aware that avoiding each other completely would feel dishonest, while stepping closer emotionally felt risky, and they chose the middle ground. Speaking carefully but truthfully, sharing updates about work, about stress, about the small things that made days easier or harder. And Emily noticed how Daniel never crossed a line, never spoke carelessly, which made her respect him more even as her emotions deepened. And one evening, as the sky turned orange and the neighborhood quieted, they found themselves walking in the same direction by coincidence, slowing their steps to match each other, and Daniel spoke first, admitting that the past weeks had made him reflect on parts of himself he had neglected, how he had stopped asking questions about his own happiness. And Emily responded by sharing that she had spent years believing independence meant silence, only to learn that connection did not weaken strength, and their words flowed with urgency but clarity. Not dramatic confessions, but steady truths. And as they walked, both of them felt the tension of choosing honesty while holding restraint, knowing that emotional closeness can be just as powerful as physical presence. And when they reached the corner where their paths separated, they stopped, the pause stretching longer than expected. Daniel looking at the ground before meeting Emily's eyes and saying quietly that he didn't want to hurt anyone, including her, and Emily felt a tightness in her chest as she agreed, understanding that care sometimes means stepping back even when feelings pull forward. And they parted with a shared understanding that felt fragile yet respectful. But the quiet after that conversation was harder than before, because now they had named the weight without resolving it. And Emily returned home feeling restless, sitting by the window with the lights off, watching shadows move across the street as Daniel's house glowed softly, reminding her that emotions do not exist in isolation but in the context of real lives. And she questioned whether acknowledging connection was enough or whether distance was necessary. While Daniel lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about responsibility, choice, and how easily the heart can be surprised. And over the next days they created subtle distance, fewer conversations, shorter greetings. Yet the absence felt louder than their presence ever had. And Emily noticed how silence can speak just as strongly, making her realize that what she felt was not fleeting curiosity, but something deeper rooted in shared understanding. And one afternoon she found herself standing at the park again, trying to clear her thoughts, only to see Daniel there once more, sitting quietly. And this time neither of them pretended surprise, both acknowledging with a small smile that they had come seeking the same quiet. And they talked again, not about feelings directly, but about choices, about how life often presents moments that test values rather than desires. And Daniel said something that stayed with Emily, that sometimes the bravest thing is not to chase what feels good, but to protect what matters. And Emily nodded, understanding that courage can look like restraint. And as they sat there, the weight between them shifted from confusion to clarity. Not because the feelings were gone, but because they were finally being faced with honesty. And when they stood to leave, there was a sense of closure forming. Not an ending, but a boundary shaped by respect. And Emily walked home with a mix of sadness and calm, realizing that part 3 of this story was not about growing closer, but about learning when closeness must pause. And though her heart felt heavy, it also felt proud. Knowing that choosing integrity over impulse does not erase emotion but transforms it into something quieter, stronger, and lasting, leaving her aware that the hardest chapters are often the ones where nothing visibly happens, yet everything inside changes. The week after their quiet acknowledgement of boundaries passed slowly, each day feeling longer as Emily moved through her routines with a heightened awareness of small moments. Noticing the spaces where Daniel might be, wondering if he was thinking the same way she was, yet never expecting a change. And then one late afternoon, the sky turning soft golden pink with the setting sun. She decided to take a walk through the park at the edge of the neighborhood, hoping the fresh air would calm the swirl of thoughts in her mind. And as she rounded the familiar path, she spotted Daniel sitting on a bench, a coffee in his hand, not looking surprised but rather calm to see her. And they greeted each other with quiet smiles. A mutual understanding that nothing needed to be forced. Yet something significant was ready to be spoken. And Emily started with a small observation about how peaceful the park looked in the evening. How the colors of the sky reminded her that even ordinary days could feel beautiful if you noticed them. And Daniel nodded, commenting that he had been thinking about similar things, about how easy it is to get caught in routines and forget the simple joys that once mattered. And as they walked slowly along the path together, their conversation deepened naturally, shifting from everyday matters to reflections on life, choices, and the ways people sometimes let important connections slip by unnoticed. And Emily felt the familiar warmth in her chest, the pull of genuine attention. Yet she also felt the comfort of restraint, realizing that attraction did not always demand action. And Daniel spoke honestly, admitting that the past weeks had reminded him that human connection, even fleeting, can be powerful. But understanding and being understood sometimes creates more impact than any dramatic event. And Emily listened, feeling her heart respond not with reckless desire, but with appreciation for the honesty and care between them. And as they paused near a small fountain, the water sparkling in the fading light, Daniel said softly that life often tests people by presenting moments that tempt them to act on emotion. Yet the true measure is knowing when to step back to protect what matters most. And Emily nodded, tears threatening to spill, not from sadness, but from the intensity of the moment. Realizing that the breathless feeling she had experienced at their first ride had transformed into something deeper, a recognition of the heart's capacity to feel without breaking rules, without causing harm, a quiet kind of exhilaration. And as the sun dipped lower, painting shadows along the path, they spoke about what it meant to care without overstepping, about respect, honesty, and the unspoken promise that these moments of connection could exist without destruction. And Daniel said he valued her presence more than she could know, not in a romantic sense meant to create conflict, but as a reminder that life could still surprise with small acts of kindness and genuine conversation. And Emily realized that what left her breathless was not a physical longing but the emotional clarity, the sense that someone had truly seen her, heard her, and honored her without expectation. And she responded with the same openness, acknowledging that she too had felt the unexpected weight of their conversations, that it had reminded her that emotions can be powerful even when carefully contained. And as they prepared to leave, they walked together to the edge of the path, pausing before parting, the quiet around them filled with unspoken understanding. And Daniel said gently that sometimes connection is a gift best appreciated in silence and reflection, not in immediate action. And Emily felt a calm settle in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and awe for the restraint and respect that framed their interaction. And when they finally parted, each turning toward their own homes, Emily walked slowly, letting the air wash over her, feeling lighter yet more alive than she had in weeks, understanding that part 4 of this story was about the power of emotional truth, about recognizing that feelings can exist fully without creating harm, about learning that restraint, honesty, and care can create moments that take your breath away more profoundly than passion ever could. And as she opened her front door, the sky now deep with twilight, she knew that the ride, the conversations, the notes, and the quiet park moments had changed her, had reminded her of the strength in being aware. The beauty in shared understanding and the thrill of realizing that the human heart is capable of deep connection. And sometimes the most moving stories are the ones without dramatic gestures or reckless choices, where every word, glance, and pause carries weight, leaving hearts stirred, thoughts lingering. And the realization that even fleeting moments, handled with honesty and respect, can transform ordinary days into memories that will quietly, yet forever, remain.